So let's talk about the adrenal glands. As I said, we have two of them. One sits on top of each kidney. So here, and they're a little triangle-shaped gland, okay? And there's our kidneys. All right. They have so many functions, so many vital foundational functions, and some of the most common symptoms that we experience, I can tie right back to those adrenal glands being out of balance. Okay, and you'll see why in just a minute here. First of all, one of the things that probably the main thing that the adrenals do is it releases a hormone called cortisol. And cortisol is the body's natural anti-inflammatory. Okay? So it has to respond to all stresses and inflammation in the body. And let's take a side trip here for a minute. I want to talk about 4 words that are interchangeable that will help paint this picture of the importance of the adrenal glands even better. So 4 words are interchangeable: stress, and not just mental emotional stress, which is what we have a tendency to think of first whenever we hear the word stress, but also chemical stresses like the foods we eat, the air we breathe, the water we drink. Okay? Those are stresses to the body. And physical stress, having surgery, over-exercising, breaking your leg, those are physical stress. Not sleeping well is a physical stress to the body. Okay? So stress, inflammation, I mentioned this before, that it really is the root of all chronic degenerative diseases, including autoimmune and cancers. There's always going to be inflammation there when these things are going on in the body. Okay? Stress, inflammation, acidic, as in the body's pH, not our blood, but systemically, the pH of our bodies internally. The blood is a very specific pH, and it will always stay the same, and if it doesn't, we're dead. Okay, so we're not talking about blood. No, there's a difference. We're talking systemically, the inside of our bodies. So stress, inflammation, acidic, and toxic. And let me tell you some words that are an example of toxic, or not words, but ingredients. Artificial sweeteners. Diet sodas are the absolute worst thing that we could put into our bodies. Secondary only to cigarettes, which has thousands of toxins in each cigarette, okay? And right next to that, as far as it being very stressful and toxic to the body, is diet sodas. They're huge. And really, artificial sweeteners put in anything. So anything that says sugar-free, you look at those ingredients, you want to make sure that there isn't artificial sweeteners in there, because it's a huge, huge toxic, cancer-causing chemical, which is not natural to the body, okay? I mean, if you have to, eat regular sugar. I'm not even advocating that, but the artificial sweeteners are 10 times worse than regular sugar. And hopefully by now we all know how bad regular sugar is for us. And then next in line is the regular sodas as far as the toxic to the body. So 4 words are interchangeable: stress, inflammation, acidic, and toxic. If one of those is there, the others are there. We drink that 1 soda a week, which people don't think is much, and it's a lot. Okay, we drink 1 soda a week. It's causing inflammation in the body, which is stress to the body, which that cortisol has to respond to. Remember, the cortisol is the body's natural anti-inflammatory. Okay, so every time, and it's chronic, we have become a chronic state here in our country. We are chronically acidic, we're chronically stressed, chronic inflammation in the body. And so those adrenal glands, and that cortisol in particular, is constantly and chronically being released and wearing out those adrenal glands. Okay, what does that matter? Let me tell you some of the other functions of the adrenal glands. Another thing the adrenals do is it tells the liver, remember our big liver guy, it tells the liver to release that glucose that I told you is stored there. And once again, that glucose is the body's natural energy source. Another place that the body is needed is in our brain. That is our brain fuel. And that is the reason why we can't live without at least one. We have to have at least one adrenal gland. We have to. Otherwise, we'd be dead, because it is this organ's role to send glucose, the brain's fuel, to the brain. And if we don't have that, we're dead, because then the brain can't do its job. Okay? So it is huge, huge, huge. If we have the brain fog and we can't think straight, we're always forgetting things, That could be an indication of those adrenal glands being stressed. Another thing that the adrenals do is releases brain chemicals, epinephrine and norepinephrine. Okay? And they work with other brain chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, and melatonin. So there's our anxieties, depressions, the blues, not being able to sleep well. All of those brain chemicals are affected by these other brain chemicals that they work very closely with that the adrenal glands release. Epinephrine and norepinephrine have an effect on our dopamine, serotonin, and melatonin, or our feel-good hormones. Okay? So that's another thing it does. This cortisol is upstream. There's constantly chemical reactions flowing and running in the body. Well, this cortisol is upstream, and the chemical pathways that are always flowing, it's upstream of our testosterone, our estrogen, and progesterone, our reproductive hormones. And again, the body's going to always, reserve on that cortisol to respond to this stuff in lieu of our reproductive hormones. It says, sorry, you guys, you're not life-threatening right now. This is the more important task at hand. I got to address all this inflammation. So whenever we're seeing the hormones are out of balance, no matter how old we are, younger people are experiencing this more and more these days too, is their hormones being out of balance. And the polycystic ovarian syndromes. And of course, there's hidden food sensitivities and caffeine and things like that will contribute to that also. But, the ovarian cyst and the uterine fibroids and things like that. And of course, there's our early menopause. We shouldn't be going through menopause so early. And I mean, young women are having hysterectomies because they can't fix anything, so they're just cutting out body parts. Well, what about if this is the root cause of the problem? So, there's our hot flashes, there's our moodiness, there's our inability to sleep well, just all kinds of things going on, can't think right. And remember that liver, whenever it's out of balance, also helps regulate those hormones as well. So, and quite often, because the adrenal glands and the thyroid gland share a master gland called the anterior pituitary. This is sending signals to the anterior pituitary. The thyroid sending signals. It's sending signals back to these glands. Well, when this gland is overworked and keeps sending these signals back and forth here, then this gland is not able to do its job right, and it can't signal to the thyroid gland right. So too often people are telling me that they've been told that they have thyroid problems based on only one or maybe two thyroid markers, which is inaccurate. It's not complete. But also quite often that thyroid imbalance is secondary to those. It's a secondary problem to the adrenal glands. The adrenal quite often is the true root of the problem whenever those adrenals are out of balance. And just to kind of give you a picture, you may have heard of adrenal stress or adrenal fatigue. And this is very general. This certainly is not a hard and fast rule, but just a visual more than anything. I think of our first half of our life as adrenal stress. And we reach the top of the mountain here, kind of midlife. And then we start toppling down over the other side into adrenal fatigue. Okay, so in general, we're seeing, adrenal stress issues the first half of our life and the adrenal fatigue issues the second half of our life. We could be in an adrenal fatigue state, which is not a good place to be. We could be in an adrenal fatigue state, however, early on in life, depending on all those different stressors that have been contributing to the health of the body. So you can see why I'm a real big fan of those adrenal glands. Another thing the adrenals do is it tells the kidneys to regulate the fluid levels using a hormone called aldosterone. And so there's our blood pressure issues. So when people are talking about blood pressure problems, whenever they're talking about moodiness, hormone imbalances, inflammation, lowered immunity in general, this is a huge organ that when we're looking at a person's health holistically and trying to help somebody, especially with autoimmune diseases, I'm telling you, this gland comes up in our resources, in our documentation, in our textbooks, the adrenal glands are always an issue and a concern whenever we're trying to restore a person's body back to good health and balance that immune system, whether it be too low, so constantly being sick with flus and colds and things like that, or too hyper, too active with the autoimmune diseases, any autoimmune disease, okay? When somebody has Hashimoto's, that's an autoimmune disease to the thyroid, it's not a thyroid issue. It's an immune issue. Okay? So don't go yanking out the thyroid. Let's balance and restore the immune system back to a good place. Does that all make sense?